Want to stay up to date with everything that's happening on the show? Or do you have a story that you'd like to submit for one of our Listener Stories episodes? You can get in touch with the show via the website at www.hauntedukpodcast.com, on Instagram at hauntedukpodcast, on X at hauntedukpod, or you can email us at contactus@hauntedukpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and TikTok. And if you want to support the show, you can do it via either Patreon or Ko-fi. Both platforms have exactly the same content, but work in slightly different ways. One of the advantages of Patreon is its sleek user interface, but if you want to avoid those pesky additional charges Apple, Google, and Patreon apply to your subscription, then why not give Ko-fi a try? Simply open a browser window and type ko-fi/Haunted UK Podcast. That's Ko-fi/Haunted UK Podcast, and you'll soon find us. Whichever platform you choose, we're sure you'll enjoy the bonus content. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the episode. I ran upstairs as I usually did, but stopped dead on the top step, as I heard an elderly woman's voice from behind me say,
"Yo-ho!"
It sounded friendly enough, but terrifying. Slowly, I turned around to see who was there. This is episode 50, part 3 of the Haunted UK podcast, and it's time to hear more of your amazing stories. The appetite for these brilliant Listener Stories episodes never seems to go away, and it's with good reason. The quality of the stories sent in has always been fantastic, and we're back for yet another helping of strange and unusual tales from everyday listeners out there just like you. We start this episode off by joining Graham, who has kindly written in with a number of extremely weird incidents, which have taken place both at home and at work. Graham writes, "Firstly, keep up the amazing work you do. I love the podcast and somehow manage to exist while waiting for the next installment. The paranormal has always been something I've been into, and I have many stories of experiences which remain unexplained. My fascination with this topic was possibly helped by the fact my Uncle David lived with my grandparents a long time after he died in a motorcycle accident. He was my mum's youngest brother and was just 17 years old when he died in the mid-1970s. So with that, I'll start off by telling you a couple of stories which involved my Uncle David. What was his small bedroom upstairs had one of those beaded curtains in it from the 70s. My nan and granddad were horrific hoarders. They'd always find a use for something. One time, when I was young and out in the countryside with my granddad, we inexplicably found a doormat in a tree. He took it home, cleaned it, and it was still there when they moved into sheltered accommodation 20 years ago. Sorry, I digress. but I just wanted to give you an example of the lengths my nan and granddad would go to make use of almost anything. So back to the beaded curtain. Occasionally, the curtain would slam against the bedroom door. This wasn't a slight tinkle against the wood, like a breeze had played against it. Unlikely anyway, as that bedroom window was rarely opened. But more like it had been swept back into the air and flung against the woodwork. As if to say, "Still here, Mum. Still here." They once went across to Ireland to visit their other son, Ian, and after they'd come back home, Ian phoned to ask them to come back and take their little friend back with them. Ian never went into what David had been up to, but being the youngest brother, he'd always been the cheeky one. So next up, we move on to the strange happenings which I experienced at one of my previous places of work. Years ago, I worked at a book warehouse that dealt with public and school libraries up and down the country. My duties included a lot of admin, data entry, book processing. Those Dewey Decimal numbers on the side of library books aren't put there by the pixies, as well as warehousing and stock taking. My bosses could have employed more people, but they were stingy. Anyway, my working day was always hectic. Occasionally, you would find that items which you'd left in one place would go missing, reappearing sometime later, usually after I'd been harassed by one of the directors. I'd talk to the office manager, Irene, about all this, and she would just smile. It was around this time that the thing happened that I can still see after almost 25 years. I was rushing around between the partitions that feebly separated the book processing section from the main warehouse. I was holding a rook of books, and with my mind on other things, I stepped out of the way of something. I never did that, not that I ever really had to, but this thing that I saw out of the corner of my eye was massive and blue, and I stood to one side to let it pass. I looked up, and there was nothing there at all. I dropped the books in my cluttered office and ran for the front door and outside into the Haywood drizzle. I went back inside and told Irene, and she just smiled again and nodded. I've looked at old maps to try and see what the warehouse was built on, but so far, I've drawn a blank. From strange incidents at work to strange incidents at home. I was at home with friends, and we were all listening to some music. Can't remember what it was exactly, but it was probably heavy metal, but not loud, as we were talking and laughing. All of a sudden, the volume dial turned all the way up to full. The remote control was on the floor and nowhere near anyone, and the stereo itself was out of anyone's reach. It was, however, late-ish, so I darted over to the machine and tried to turn it down, but it was slow and resisted, which was really freaky, so I just unplugged it. The conversation had stopped, understandably, and my friends left sharpish for the pub. I wish I'd gone with them. One last story to finish. Our mid-terraced house was in an old mill town. My bedroom at home was the attic, which was reached via a set of proper stairs, not one of those awful stair ladders that knackers your feet when you're struggling up the rungs. I'd arranged my desk so that it butted up to the guardrail, and I was hard at work one night on my PC writing what would become a rather rubbish and forever unpublished book, when I glanced up and caught sight of something stood at the top of the stairs just looking at me. It was a very dark human shape against the monitor-lit room, and it was terrifying. It wasn't as if I'd had retina burn from the screen to transpose the shape from screen to room, like you do when you look at bright objects, as I don't look at the screen when I'm typing. I'm looking at the keyboard now typing this. I have no idea what this thing was, and have no explanation. All the best, Graham. We now move on to a couple of stories from Carl Harris. You may remember Carl from a short haunt episode called Freezing Cold. A very creepy tale about the haunting of an everyday supermarket where he worked nights down at the freezer aisle section. The following stories, whilst short, are totally different from his experiences at the supermarket. When I was at secondary school, probably around 1979 to 1980, an incident took place which even today remains outside the bounds of reasonable explanation. Around this particular time period, our school owned what we called the Mountain Centre, just outside of Llanbrymire in Wales. This place was remote, and we regularly had SAS squaddies on selection, passing by to the Brecon Beacons. One afternoon, a close friend and me had managed to purchase half a bottle of Bell's whiskey and decided to sneak off and have a little tipple. We climbed the short slope at the back of the centre and cracked open the bottle. This hillside was devoid of any vegetation except some grass, and there were no bushes or trees for yards. We settled down on the hillside and were messing around, as young lads do, when we heard a sound that made the blood in our bodies freeze. From directly behind us came a low, loud and guttural growl. Both of us could barely move, but we both managed to say something along the lines of, "What the fucking hell was that?" We slowly turned to look behind us, but saw nothing. The atmosphere quickly turned from panic to absolute terror when we heard the growl again. But this time, whatever it was had moved from behind us, circled around, to now being in front of us. But again, we saw nothing. We got the hell out of there pretty damn quick. I have no idea what this thing was, what it looked like, or whether it was even there. It's my belief that we encountered some sort of cryptozoological creature, something that was not from our dimension, and I truly believe that if we had hung around, we would never have been seen again. Moving forward now to the present day, and to a number of strange incidents which have occurred in the current flat my family and I live in. My son is just 3 years old, and I feel that he's already starting to sense the paranormal and pick up on it. He absolutely does not like his bedroom. He says that red eyes keep looking at him during the night, and he's afraid of going to sleep. The thing is, his bed is in our bedroom. One Sunday, not too long ago at all, I woke up at around 5:30 a.m. As I sat there contemplating whether I needed the toilet or not, I suddenly heard the sound of a woman's voice whispering over my son's bed. I heard the voice as clear as anything, but couldn't work out what it was saying. The voice then stopped for around 10 seconds. Then it continued to whisper again, but this time quieter. I noticed that my wife was now awake, and I asked her if she'd heard the voice, and she said she had, and it was the reason why she'd woken up with a start. Activity in our flat has been steadily increasing since the birth of our son, and I'm convinced it's my wife's mother who is behind it all, and she passed away 20 years ago. All very, very interesting. Best regards, Carl Harris. Next up, we have a couple of very strange events which took place in a cemetery in a small village in Ireland. Sent in by Peter, these stories are extremely baffling and quite creepy. We'll let Peter take over from here. Hi there. I've recently started listening to the podcast, and I just can't seem to get enough. I really enjoyed the episodes on the missing 411 and Bigfoot. I don't know if you're still accepting listener stories, but if you are, I have one to share with you. Something that recently happened to me, an event which I cannot seem to get my head around. It's not only left me perplexed, but quite frankly, a little freaked out. I live in a small village in the west of Ireland, not far from the border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. The village has a hustle and bustle with around 2,500 people living in the local area. As you can imagine, with such a small populace, the community is fairly tight-knit, and a person would know everyone pretty well, or at least know them by their face. A man from the town, now unfortunately deceased, named Paddy, used to frequent a pub quite regularly where I used to work. I would often have chit-chat with him on a regular basis. In more recent years, I did some training in the local nursing home where Paddy was a full-time resident. He was suffering from Alzheimer's and was under constant supervision. While his memory was virtually gone, he never lost the ability to play cards. During my training, I often spent time playing cards with him, and it went without saying that I lost pretty much every game. While this information does seem trivial, it is relevant to what I'm about to tell you. As I mentioned before, Paddy is now deceased and is buried in the local cemetery, which is adjoined to the church. In the evenings, I take my dogs for walks, and one route I often take is through the church grounds. Part of this route involves me cutting through the cemetery, and it's here that there is a lovely view of the village and the valley in which it is situated in. The cemetery is on a gradual slope, and as you'd expect, all the graves are in rows. Now, this is where my story starts. My dogs are both Jack Russell Terriers and are not only very feisty, but nothing ever really spooks them. One evening not long ago, I decided to cut through the graveyard like I often do, but when we reached the gate of the graveyard, both of the dogs' demeanors changed. They went from being happy, with tails wagging and general contentment to get out for a walk, to that of which their heads were down, their tails firmly between their legs, and showing a real stubbornness not to pass through the gate. Thinking nothing of it, I gently coaxed the two dogs through the gate, jokingly scolding them and asking them in that quaint country Irish way, "What's wrong with yous?" We walked up the gradual slope, passing by the graves of local folk along the way. Some of the names I recognized and some were unfamiliar. Nothing strange in that. Normally, when I reached the last grave on the slope, I would be passing by Paddy's grave. I'd normally stop for a brief moment, and in my head would say to myself, "How are you, Paddy?" Yet again in that almost comedic Irish country folk way. Now, I'm a quality manager at work, so it's fair to say that I do notice a lot of things, and I know for a fact that Paddy's grave was definitely the last one on the slope, in the very front row. I've passed it at least once a week since he passed away, and I know that it was definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, located where I said it was. So on this evening in question, as the dogs and I reached the last grave, my heart nearly went into my mouth. Paddy's grave wasn't there. I couldn't understand it. In its place, a completely different gravestone now stood. That of a woman who I would have also known from the local area, but how could this be? Paddy's grave was definitely there. My eyes started darting from grave to grave, looking for Paddy's grave in despair. I eventually found it 3 or 4 rows back, but nowhere near the top front row where I had believed it to be. Miffed about what had just happened, an uneasy feeling began to come over me, and the hairs began to stand up on the back of my neck. maybe I too was sensing what the dogs had felt earlier. I noticed that the breeze had disappeared, and the cemetery was eerily silent. You'd normally hear birdsong from the surrounding trees, as well as the wind moving through the branches, but there was nothing. I couldn't get out of there fast enough that evening. I have since passed through the cemetery, and still Paddy's grave is in the mix with all of the others, completely out of place of where I know it used to be. I really cannot understand what happened. It's not as if they moved his plot, or that many other people had been buried since he was. Reflecting upon this story, I recalled something that happened to me a few years earlier in that same cemetery. Every July on the last Sunday of the month, the local priest holds a ceremony called the Blessing of the Graves. As my grandparents are buried there, I would normally attend such an event. Not so much for the religious aspect, but just to catch up with my relatives who would also attend. Last year, I wasn't feeling well on that particular Sunday, so I actually missed the ceremony. Feeling a little guilty about this, I decided in my free time to go to the grave, to say a quiet prayer for my grandparents. I've been to the grave many times, as I often helped my mother maintain it by weeding and decorating it with flowers, as well as attending the annual visit for the blessing of the graves. But on this particular day, I couldn't find the grave, and I spent a good 20 minutes looking for it. Blaming myself, I just put it down to my own ignorance as to why I couldn't find it. But now in hindsight, I wonder if instead of my ignorance, was there something a little more sinister and paranormal at work here? Thanks for letting me share these stories, and I have numerous others I would love to share with you again on a future date. Keep up the good work. Faithfully listening, Peter. Samantha Ingram has been listening to the show from almost the beginning. She has also contributed a number of incredible experiences which have appeared in Listener Stories episodes in previous seasons. So much has happened to Sam over the years in many of the places she has lived, which includes Australia, her home now for many years. But the following amazing stories are not from her this time. They come from her sister. Once again, Samantha has been incredibly kind enough to get all of this written down and sent into the show, and we can't thank both Sam and her sister enough for letting us share these fascinating stories. Hi there, Steve. Still loving the podcast and hoping you can keep it going for many years to come. As you already know, I have many more strange stories in my memory bank, but the following are from someone else, my sister. She's been here on a visit not too long ago, and I finally managed to get her to write stuff down. Her name is Cynthia, and she lives around a 6-hour drive away in a tiny country town. But some of these stories are from when she was in high school in New South Wales. I didn't live there, but when I visited, I could sense something was there, something not seen. These things happened at different times, such as when she was on her own for the weekend, but I'll let her take over from here. Cynthia writes, "It was a suburban house, and many strange things happened there. We had a dog called Grace, a beautiful Doberman, and for some strange reason, she would bark and growl for ages at the cupboard under the stairs.
Grace, shh, shh.
There was never anything in there, well, not that we could all see. But it never stopped her from doing this over and over again. It was as if she knew there was something there, an energy, a presence maybe. She also had a habit of standing on the balcony and staring at a particular spot in a tree just outside the house. Again, she would bark repeatedly at this spot. No birds there or anything like that, but she could definitely see something that we couldn't. There were also a number of occasions when the phone would ring in the morning. I was always on my own when this happened, and always while I was asleep. As you'd expect, I would get up to answer the phone, but there would never be anyone on the other end.
Hello? Hello?
And this happened so often that I began to doubt my own grip on reality. Was I imagining this? On another occasion, I had my boyfriend over at the house one night, and on the table close to us was a pineapple. Now, this was just a regular pineapple sat on the table with neither of us anywhere near it. But it suddenly started to rock from side to side on its own. It was so incredibly strange, and we had no explanation for it back then, and I still don't have one now. I can remember another weird incident similar to the pineapple happening at a place called Mount Magnet, which is an old mining town in the Western Australian outback. This was in the 1990s, and I was in a pub in the town with a friend of mine. We were there enjoying a few drinks when we decided to order shooters. Now, I have to tell you that there was no spillage on the bar at all. After the bartender had poured the shooters and placed them on the bar, my friend and I watched in astonishment as the glasses started to slide very slowly along the bar. What the hell? Very strange. More events have recently taken place in our family restaurant business located in a country town in Western Australia. Before we opened, we completely redecorated the place, and I can vividly remember while painting a wall, hearing a clip-clop sound coming from the kitchen. It sounded like someone walking around in high-heel shoes. I got down the ladder I was on to see who was there, but there was nobody. Nothing. No sign of anyone. One of the most skin-crawling creepy experiences I've had there happened late one evening as I was preparing to lock up and leave for the night. I was the only one in the restaurant at this time, and as I turned all the lights out, I heard muffled voices. Although what they were saying was indistinguishable, the actual sound was so clear that I really thought that I'd left the TV on. After quickly checking, I realized I hadn't and became incredibly scared, so much so that I got out of there very quickly. We have a number of large silver fridges in the kitchen, and on several occasions, I've seen the reflections of what looked like people standing behind me. But upon turning around to confront whoever is there, I find myself alone. Things also go missing there and turn up in the most unlikely places or areas which we've already searched. In one incident, my husband thought he'd lost his phone. Now, we knew he'd had it with him, and we searched everywhere, checking the couch where he'd been sitting many times. Finally giving up, my husband returned to the couch to find his phone just sitting there, playing a YouTube video. I've also filmed a video of the restaurant where a strange little bluish orb-like light can be seen moving around. Again, no idea what this is or what it could represent, but it's certainly very strange. Whatever it is that is causing all of this activity, it doesn't shy away from making itself known to multiple witnesses. My son, husband, and I have all been locked out of the kitchen by something. We've gone to another room or the bathroom, for instance, then returned, but have found the kitchen door firmly locked, leaving us with no option but to gain entry from another door, only to find that the kitchen door had been unlocked all along. My husband has many more stories but doesn't like talking about it, as he is there the most, sometimes alone. And now we return to Samantha, Cynthia's sister, who concludes the tale by saying, "My sister has told me about this stuff many times before, and I think she has seen at least one ghostly apparition, which was a lady out of the corner of her eye. And those strange reflections she mentioned in the silver fridges were always dark forms with a human shape to them. I can even remember her calling me one night when she was locking up by herself, because she felt freaked out, uncomfortable, frightened, as if someone was in there with her. Regards, Samantha and Cynthia." Wanting to stay anonymous when sending in stories about the paranormal is more than understandable. For some, it's a fear of judgment or ridicule, but for others, it's because of their job. Maybe they work in a position which could be compromised because of their experiences or beliefs, or that they simply don't want to attract unwanted attention to either themselves or their place of work. Our next listener wishes to remain anonymous, so we'll call her Vicky. The selection of stories which she has sent into the show are nothing short of astounding and very, very creepy. When I was 18 years old, I was studying dance at college in a little seaside town. I needed a part-time job to be able to enjoy the things 18-year-old girls enjoy doing, such as shopping with friends, going to the cinema, etc. My aunt was working at the local tax office as a cleaner in the evenings and asked if I wanted a job there. It was Monday to Friday, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m, and it was just around the corner from college, so naturally I said yes. A few things happened whilst I worked there, and the whole place had a vibe that felt off. But the worst experiences I had there were as follows. On the top floor, there was a room right at the back. As soon as I got close to this room, I got the feeling something didn't want me in there. I only ever entered the room once, and whilst I never actually saw anything, there was always a terrifying presence inside. I spent months talking to a man called Jason. We got on great, and we'd have conversations about his girlfriend and son as I walked around cleaning and he followed. One day, he wasn't at work, so as a concerned friend, I asked one of the other employees if he was okay, but what I was told chilled me to my core. No one knew of a man named Jason. No one. And there was nobody employed at the offices called Jason. 17 years later, and I still wonder who I was talking to 5 days a week for months on end, sharing conversations and laughs. One of the creepiest places in the building were where the bins were kept, and it was here that I had a truly frightening experience. The bins were actually kept in a room underground, and one night after finishing work, I told my aunt to get in the car and wait whilst I sorted the rubbish out and put it in the bins. As I turned around from putting the bags into the bins, there were two shadows of men hanging from what looked like to be gallows. I never went down there myself again. Moving on a few years, I was now in my late 20s and began working at an Ann Summers store located in a major shopping centre. One day, I was in the stockroom with a girl who we'll call Amy. We'd both gone to different ends of the room to get some stock to put out, when suddenly the lights went out and something yanked my hair. A few seconds later, the lights came back on and Amy was still at the other end of the stockroom. There was no way that she could have got to me, pulled my hair, and got back in that short time. She also had no reason to want to pull my hair. From that day on, I could never go back into the stockroom alone, and I could never stand with my back to the door. There was a very dark feeling down there, as if someone or something didn't want me there at all. I currently work in a veterinary hospital in a small seaside town in the southwest. I won't name the said town because people would know who I was and where I worked. Bad for business, I'm sure you'll understand. The building that I work in is very old. 2 mornings and 2 nights a week, I work in the building on my own for a couple of hours, and each time that I'm on my own, I get the feeling of dread. I feel as though there is someone in the building with me. One night, I was putting the cash away and turning off all the lab equipment upstairs when I could feel something following me around. The feeling was so strong that it actually felt as though someone was stood about a centimeter behind me, almost touching me. When I got to the top of the stairs, ready to walk down and go home, whatever was behind me felt like it was on top of me and ready to push me down the stairs. It took all of my courage, but I said,
"Whoever you are, I'm not here to hurt you. Please leave me alone, and we can both stay."
I still feel that same presence every day, even when the practice is full of people and animals, and I also often see someone out of the corner of my eye when I'm alone. A short story now follows from Mel Smith, and it describes the amazing series of experiences which both he and his wife witnessed while they were on a paranormal tour at Dudley Castle. It was in the late 90s into the 2000s when my then wife and I visited Dudley Castle on a ghost hunt. At the beginning of the tour, we were taken to, if I remember correctly, the gatehouse, an archway within the grounds, not far from a cottage, I believe. The tour guide asked for volunteers to stand under the arch, and me being me, a believer in the supernatural, shot my hands straight up, as did a few others. But my wife, no. She was a skeptic. He asked us to take deep breaths, close our eyes and relax. Of course, I was compliant. Then it started. The lightheadedness, the feeling of floating, and also the tightening sensation around my throat. So apparently, it was this spot where people were hung for their heinous crimes, such as stealing chickens, etc. Next on the list was the vigil. We were taken to a large room, a hall of some description. Chairs were placed in a circle within the room, and we were asked to take a seat while it was explained what was about to happen. First, the lights went off, and it was completely dark. We were then asked to focus our attention and concentration to the center of the circle. My wife saw it first. Something blue, floating, drifting in and out of focus. "Mel, do you see that?" she asked. With excitement I replied, "Blue?" "Yes," she answered. This was where a young girl could be seen dancing, we were told. With the room still in darkness, more strange things started to happen. "I feel something behind me," I stated. "So do I," the person to my left said. "Let them through," we were instructed, so we slid our chairs sideways to make a gap. "Mel," my wife said, "there's something on my lap." "How do you mean?" I asked. "I can feel something sitting on my lap," my wife replied. It was a friendly monk, we were informed. So there you have it, my experiences at Dudley Castle. Don't even ask about what happened with the Ouija board years before. Kind regards, Mel Smith. As you can already guess, I did ask for that Ouija board story, but so far, Mel hasn't replied. So if you're listening, Mel, please get in touch, as we'd love to hear that story. And if you would like to hear more creepy tales about Dudley Castle, then please check out our very first episode. Next up is Kathy, all the way from the USA, and her story is truly creepy. Whilst the beginning tells of an event which happened to her as a child, it quickly moves to a hotel which seems to have an incredibly aggressive and nasty atmosphere. An entity of some sorts which would do anything it could to make Kathy leave. Kathy was also incredibly kind enough to send over another story which, with her permission, has now been developed into a full episode. That story will be released as part of Season 6, and we've never had anything like it before. But for now, let's continue with this story. Hello, and thank you for your most excellent podcast. I really love the episodes with the personal stories, and while I have several, in the interest of brevity, I'll just send this one for now. I live in Portland, Oregon, USA, and it all begins with a rabbit. When I was a 5th grader, my sister, who was 4 years younger, had a pet rabbit who lived out back in a hutch. Apparently, the rabbit hated his life because he broke out of the hutch anytime he could. I hated this rabbit because my parents made me find and catch him each time he did this. My sister was too young to cross the street and go out of the yard. She should never have had a rabbit, in my opinion, and my parents couldn't be bothered, so I was enlisted to find my sobbing sister's large, white, madly kicking, horrible pet. I hated my parents. I was born in 1961 and raised by proto-boomers, and one of my childhood anxieties was going into other people's yards. It was transgressive, and yet I had to in order to look for that stupid rabbit. So I crossed the street to check the space between the houses of the mean old lady on the corner and our friend's house, 2 girls who we used to play with. It was narrow and dark with a dense stand of bamboo on my left, and the exterior of the mean old lady's house on my right. For some reason, I was crawling because there were windows, and I was afraid that if I stood up, the mean old lady might come out and yell at me. Or maybe another neighbor might come out and ask me what I was doing, which to my 10-year-old mind would have been the absolute limit of humiliation. I remember crawling in the wet grass and mud. It rains all the time in Oregon, and feeling very angry and put out. I didn't know any curse words back then with the exception of "damn it," which I repeated like a mantra until something drew my attention. I glanced up, and looking out of the window of the mean old lady's house was a hideous skull. I could clearly make out its horrible eye sockets and evil grin. I froze, unable to stop staring at it. Then I managed to scramble to my feet and sprint towards my house. I fell in the middle of the street, but was up in a millisecond, running from that horrible haunted head, until I finally reached the big tree in our yard and sat down against it, trying not to sob. I was desperately trying to catch my breath, looking at my bloody knees and praying no one had seen me fall. I began to think of King Arthur, who was a hero of mine, and I decided I had to make myself go back and look at the skull. I'm not sure why I felt this way, and it was the first time I'd consciously had this thought. I think it was more about bravery and mastering myself than anything else. I'd been reading Thomas Malory, La Morte d'Arthur. Yes, I was a big geek. I knew that a knight of the Round Table would never run away. Monty Python didn't enter my life until 10 years later, and so I was bound to cross the street again to look at it, whatever it was. That horrible, glowing, dead man's head. I went back, walking on 2 feet. I couldn't crawl because I had gravel in my knees. And there it was. A lamp. A green and white round ceramic lampshade with pink and yellow spring flowers painted on it. It was hideous, all right, but it wasn't a skull. It was nothing to be afraid of. I found the rabbit and put it back in its hutch, but like many escaped prisoners, it was doomed to die, killed by a neighbor's hunting dog who was also known for getting out of its kennel. Fast forward to 2018, and I was on a trip with my 18-year-old daughter Elizabeth. We were staying in an absolutely fabulous Italian revival-style condo on the Oregon side of the Columbia River, within walking distance of the famously haunted Columbia George Hotel. We'd shunned it, not because we were afraid of ghosts, but because I hated the 1970s decor. It's like being on the set of the Poseidon adventure before the ship capsized and they had to climb up the Christmas tree. We loved our vacation so much that we wanted to stay another day, but our Italian condo wasn't available. So being a planner, I began to search the internet for other hotels in the area. We decided to go into town, a historic place called Hood River, and check out the old brick hotel on the corner of the main street. It has a cute Norwegian cafe with an unpronounceable name and a bevy of craft cocktails. So we decided to drop in and see about rooms. It was the middle of the day when we walked into the lobby, which was decorated like a mixture of dead wood and 6 feet under. High wooden windows with velvet drapes that, while tied back, let in very little light. An enormous staring taxidermied elk's head, a black and white tiled floor, and at the far end of the rectangular room, a check-in desk that looked like a cowboy bar. The concierge was a blonde with a pierced nose who needed to touch up her roots. She was from Gresham, which was reassuring because Gresham is a bland Portland suburb. She was wearing a Ramones t-shirt, and she was by far the most normal thing in the room. So after some usual pleasantries, it turned out that they did have a room up on the 3rd floor. For some reason, I did something I never do. I asked to see the room first, and surprisingly, the concierge agreed and handed me a large old-fashioned key. Off to the left was a set of grand stairs, and next to those was a kind of cubbyhole. Inside this was an old-fashioned elevator, the kind with the metal cage door that's like an accordion. I'd noticed this elevator going up and down a couple of times, but there was never anyone in it. As Elizabeth and I headed for it, the concierge girl said something like, "Oh, that just does what it wants. It probably won't come back down." As it happened, it didn't, so we headed for the stairs. It was so sunny that day, and as we climbed the stairs and left the lobby behind, the building got brighter and brighter. There was a huge window on the landing that looked out onto the brick buildings of Hood River. I wanted to visit the 1860s bank, which was now a storefront for Hood River vodka. This premium booze is kept in the safe, something that excited me greatly, but we first needed to check out the room. The 3rd floor was long and carpeted, with tall windows at either end, and we could see a group of housekeepers and their carts making noise down the hall. I waved at them, but they didn't wave back. They just stood there and looked at us for a minute, then turned away. That's a little weird, I thought. Elizabeth lounged in her fancy sunglasses, waiting for me to get the key out of my bag. Room 301 was flanked by another room on the right and the staircase and window to the left, and everything seemed perfectly normal. I put the key in the lock, opened the door, and in we walked, ready to check out our room. As we walked inside, I had time to notice a bedroom to my left with a tacky J.C. Penney bedspread. Venturing further, there was a dining room table with a bunch of chairs, and the curtains were drawn. Then out of nowhere, something came at me like a freight train. I could sense its movement, like a grizzly bear charging at me, or even a tiger. Whatever it was, it clearly wanted to eat me, and in an instant my lizard brain was screaming for me to run. I turned around and began shouting,
"Get out! Get out!"
to poor Elizabeth, who I'd pushed ahead of me in a mad atavistic panic. I was once held hostage with a gun in my mouth, but this fear was worse. So much worse. Seriously. We got back into the hall and back to the sunshine, but the housekeepers were nowhere to be seen. I was crying uncontrollably at this point and trying to catch my breath. Elizabeth stared at me and said, "Mom," tentatively. "Mom, are you all right?" Clearly, she hadn't felt what I'd felt inside that room. Maybe she'd tuned into a different radio station, so to speak. As I stood there in the hallway, I felt that there was only one thing for it. I had to go back into that room. just like when I had to go back to that mean old lady's house when I was a child. Maybe it was similar to that situation, I told myself. Maybe it's just like the lamp pretending to be a glowing skull. It's probably nothing, I said, as Elizabeth looked doubtful. I'll just go back in, but you wait here, okay? She nodded her head, clutching her sunglasses in her hand. I put the big key back in the lock, the brass circle dangling with 301 on it. I unlocked the door and walked back in. This time, whatever it was waiting for me, and it didn't even give me a chance to get more than a couple of feet into the room before it rushed at me again. I quickly retreated from the room again, slamming the door on the way out, and my hysterics were now completely uncontrollable. Elizabeth, seeing my panic, said, "Here, just put these on," and handed me her sunglasses while taking the key from my shaking hand. I was desperately trying to catch my breath as we walked back down the stairs and into the lobby. As I stood there, trying to remain composed, I could hear Elizabeth talking to the girl at the desk. "Sorry, we've changed our minds," Elizabeth explained, and with that, I headed into the bathroom, which was right next to the elevator. I began to wash my hands and face in a bid to try and calm down, when I suddenly felt something in the corner of the room staring at me. It wasn't a person, and this left me thinking straight away. What? Again? Seriously, this was now just too much. I rushed out of the bathroom and exclaimed loudly, "Don't bother going in there, it's haunted too," too unnerved for pretense. There was a shop next door with everything cute, and the owner was a darling girl with a fluffy, smiling Pomeranian. The Pomeranian had a bow in its hair. If this didn't get rid of the spooks, then nothing would. But it was then that I noticed that I had black ink on just my washed hands. I had no idea where it had come from, but I didn't want to touch anything, so I gave Elizabeth my credit card and told her to spend $100. I then asked the owner where the nearest bar was. Conveniently, it was right next door in the same brick building, and so I headed there and ordered a shot of Maker's Mark before heading into the bathroom to wash the ink, or whatever it was, off my hands. I felt terrible, and this must have come across very visibly, because the girl bartender asked me if I was okay. I said yes, then ordered another shot, after which she left me alone to brood. I felt so bad, and because of this, I bought a t-shirt advertising the place. Elizabeth was happy because we finally sorted out that extra night in our room at the Italian condo, and our next stop was the old bank that sold vodka. That night, we had a lovely dinner at the Columbia George Hotel, and then went home the next day. But I still hate rabbits. We now come to the last story of this episode and the reason for its name, the mimic in the house. Tom was kind enough to send in these experiences, which are truly fascinating, and they contain a number of different elements of the paranormal. But were they all coming from the same source? Or was it something more sinister? Hi there. I recently found your podcast and have been binge listening as I drive a lot for my job. I hope you are still after listener stories, as I've had a few paranormal experiences growing up. These occurred in a home I lived in between the ages of 12 and 16 years of age. The house I lived in was around 200 years old and was a care home for the elderly around the time it was built. It was empty when we moved in and had been for around 18 months, but before this, it had also been a foster home. Evidence of the various uses of this building could be seen in the kitchen, with the old bell ringing system for the residents and the old disused buttons in each room that had been painted over. The attic was another space that held information of the building's past, but this time in the form of boxes of documents. These documents all had dates on the front, and were most likely the records of past residents that the staff at the time had filled in. The earliest being from the mid to late 1800s, and whilst I never opened any of these records to have a read though, I always wished I had. I've always been interested in the paranormal and would watch the different ghost hunting shows on TV. Don't get me wrong, I believed in ghosts, but had never had an experience until I moved into the above-mentioned house. There were two main occurrences that I directly witnessed that happened whilst I was completely alone, but there were also other incidents, which I'll soon get to. The first happened as I arrived home from school. I'd been in the house for less than a minute and had gone upstairs to put my things into my room. To get to my bedroom, you just literally went straight up the stairs as you got into the house. I also had a room where my PlayStation was set up. Both rooms were on their own separate corridor, straight ahead with a toilet at the end, and then there was another half set of stairs which led up to another landing where the rest of the bedrooms were located. I ran upstairs as I usually did, but stopped dead on the top step, as I heard an elderly woman's voice from behind me say,
"Yo-ho!"
It sounded friendly enough, but terrifying. Slowly, I turned around to see who was there, and I was met with nobody. Every hair on my body stood on end, and still does when I think about it. I stayed in my room until my mum, dad and siblings got home, about 2 hours later. The second incident happened when I was making my way back to my room after coming back from the toilet. I heard a really loud knocking noise coming from what sounded like the back door. There were about 4 or 5 very audible knocks before it stopped. There was a window above the back door, which was across from the door to my room, so as I looked down, I was able to see if anyone was at the door. But again, nobody. Initially, I thought a neighbour had come through the bushes which were between the houses, and had then quickly gone back, but I think this was just me trying to rationalise why there wouldn't have been anyone there that I could see. Access to the back door would have been difficult for any kids to potentially play knock door run, because it was fenced and gated off from the front. I'm not sure what it was, but it was strange. There were other odd experiences as well which took place, such as me clearly hearing my mum call my name,
Tom?
only to see that she was in the kitchen and hadn't said a word. And she also had a similar experience. She was positive that she'd heard what she thought was me getting home from school, opening the front door, closing it, and then hearing me say, "I'm home." Half an hour later, I came through the front door, and my siblings were really young at this point and only left the house with my mum, so it couldn't have been them, and my dad would have been at work and wouldn't have got back home until around 6 or 7 o'clock that evening. She also experienced the sound of a dog growling in the room with her, when our dog was in another room with my dad. What made this even stranger was that one of my little brothers always used to say that he could see a black dog that wasn't ours. And speaking of our dogs, they'd sometimes be seemingly fixed on something, staring at certain areas or sat at the bottom of the stairs, just looking up at nothing, but occasionally growling. I believe the house is now empty again, but I would love to go back for a night to see if there's anything still there. I've been on a couple of paranormal investigations and would love to add this as a place I could investigate. I love the podcast and hope to hear my story told on one of the Listener Stories episodes. Keep up the good work. Kindest regards and many thanks, Tom Clarkson King. So it's here that we bid you farewell, but just for this episode, because we have plenty more listener stories to come. As always, we want to thank each and every one of you who have sent in your stories. Without all of you, these amazing episodes wouldn't exist. So take care, stay safe, and look out for each other. But also, look out for the strange and unusual, the weird and the scary, the unbelievable and the uncanny. Because it only takes one paranormal incident to occur, and it could be your opportunity to tell your story, your turn to tell a tale of a chilling event, a scary sighting, a frightening creature. Just one incident. And that next person could be you.